Welcome back. I know it's been a long time since I've done a video, but I thought what you really needed in your lives was a really crap version of Big Clive. So what I'm going to do today is tear down this Zosi camera. So this is a Wi-Fi camera. It's designed to work with a given digital video recorder, a CCTV DVR, and it only works with that one. But the interesting thing is it comes paired to that DVR. So you don't have to enter a password, you don't have to pair it or anything like that, it's already paired. So I thought I'd take a look and see what the firmware is like on this. But the first step to getting the firmware of one of these is having a look inside of it. So this is going to really focus on the hardware. Now this does claim that it's FCC certified. So there you can see it says FCC. I can't find an FCC ID. I don't know if it's actually FCC certified or not. It's quite common to find that's not actually a genuine mark. I don't know with these, to be honest. So let's get into this device. You'll notice it's got a Wi-Fi antenna, which does remove, I think. Yep, so the Wi-Fi antenna comes off. That's not too hard to remove. It's got power and Ethernet on it as well. Nearly all of these run on 12 volts. Interesting thing is that it doesn't use Ethernet, and the DVR doesn't have an Ethernet port on it for these, so it's not like it could be used as a wired camera as well with that system. Not sure why that is. It's got an activity LED on it, on the actual connector here. So it's a waterproof connector as well, actually. It's got a bayonet on it. I'd imagine it would lock into something. So maybe it was intended to be used with another system. Right, so we need to get inside this thing. That's going to unscrew, isn't it? So let's unscrew this base plate. Get that out of the way as much as possible. And then we've got 3 screws on the back here. So let's pop these out. Now, Big Clive always says something really amusing and profound and interesting whilst he's unscrewing stuff. I'm not Big Clive though. So these cameras came, a pack of 4 of them with the DVR. I think it was 170 or 180 pounds. So it's not cheap. No storage in the DVR either, which is, you know, we're talking quite expensive really. Right, so that's the back of that off. Let's just drop the screws out the back. Ah, they're not coming. Right, so it's got a rubber gasket on it, or a plastic gasket, rubber gasket around the edge there for weather sealing. So that'll be common to find. That'll break the screws out. Let's push them out of the way. We don't want those. So we've got the camera there. The front part of it, glass lens, or glass cover rather. It's not really a lens. It's got this little separator there. So what that will be is, to prevent the infrared LEDs reflecting off the glass back into the camera, you have this little separator and a little bit of foam around the front of the camera that isolates it, so you don't get the reflections coming back. Quite a few of the lower cost cameras do that. Right, so let's see if we can just pop this bracket off the back so it's a bit less awkward to move around, a bit less noisy. There we go. Let's try and do the actual thing you're supposed to undo to bend it. Completely undo that. There we go, that's a bit better. So yeah, you can see we've got quite a few infrared LEDs on the front here. So it looks like 20 of them. This slightly blue device there will be possibly ambient light sensor to change the brightness of those LEDs so that they're only on at night time. Let's pop these 2 screws off the front to get this board off. Use another screwdriver. Right, so that's the reverse of that board. So we've got 3 wires coming in, some resistors, a few transistors, possibly voltage regulators. Right, just having a look at that. So it looks like the red and black, the power, are coming straight in from the connector at the back. So the infrared LED board actually draws quite a lot of power. And it's common to find they take the 12 volts directly on the input to do that. This yellow wire, you can see that just goes off to the main board there. That will likely be to turn the LEDs on and off. So that'll be a signal sending it through to there. So let's just pop this off. Yep, so that board's done with. Right, now we've got the actual camera board here. So this is held on by 2 posts. Let's get these off. Nearly always M4. Let's pop those off. Right, so now we've got the main camera board. Right, that's interesting. So the Wi-Fi is a separate module. We'll come on to that. Right, so let's look at what I've got here. On this side we have that signal going to the LED board. Let's pop that off as well. We've got 4 wires going off to the Wi-Fi module. So black, white, yellow, red. So it's going to be power, ground, either serial or USB. Then we've got the connector going to the back there, which is black and red, and then 5 other wires. So I'd imagine what's happening is power's coming in from the single connector at the back, and then it might be splitting down two sets of wires at some point. So both the LEDs and the main board get that 12 volts. Right, so let's pull this connector off. That's nice and easy. Okay, so let's move that out of the way. Right, and now we've got the camera module itself. Looks like a fairly typical camera module. You'll notice that there are 2 wires going into the lens assembly. So what these do is they control something called the infrared cut filter. So there's a little filter that moves in and out. So that infrared cut filter is in place during the day and it stops infrared light getting through to the CMOS sensor. They're very sensitive to infrared light, and that means that the colour rendition of it is more accurate. At night time it moves that infrared cut filter out of the way so that it will take infrared light in, primarily from the LEDs on the front. So it makes it more sensitive, but the colour essentially turns to black and white at night. They're nearly always just a tiny little solenoid. So let's pop the front of this module off. Just 3 little screws. You might notice I'm not being very careful here. I've got no intention on putting this back together as a camera. And then that will come off. Yep, so the lens has come off. So there you can see you've got a copper coil, a solenoid there, and then you've got the IR cut filter, which can swing backwards and forwards. So normally you've got one there, that one looks colourless, and then this one will be slightly coloured. That will be the IR cut one, so it can move from side to side. It doesn't require power all of the time. It's not a sprung mechanism. It applies it in one direction, flips over that way, applies power in the other direction, flips over that way. So you can just see the CMOS sensor underneath there. The lens module on these, you can see that's threaded. There's a blob of hot glue on it to hold it in place. You can change the focus on these a bit, but they are fixed focus. You have to take them apart, remove that glue and move it. Feels like it's a plastic lens, but it's kind of hard to tell with something that small. Right, let's pop this, the rest of this lens assembly off. So first off, I am going to take off the connector. Some of these are a little bit fiddly. There we go. Then the screws are on this side. Just 2 screws. This is a really common assembly technique for these. So yeah, you've got the CMOS sensor there in the middle that is directly mounted to the board. So what else have we got on this side? Well, we've got that's the USB connector or power and serial connector down through to the Wi-Fi. We've got the LED control there. That chip there is an SPI flash chip. So it's a 25L128 something. So that'll be 128 megabits most likely, 16 megabytes in size. What's that chip there? CHMC SG9. Let's just get the magnifying glass out, it's a bit too small for my eyes. Oh, CHMC SF6 D6208. I think that's a motor driver. Which, yes, okay. So what's going on here is to drive that solenoid on the other side of the board. We have, there's where the solenoid comes in for the infrared cut filter. And then we've got a motor driver on this side to drive that solenoid in one direction or the other, because you have to be able to flip the voltage from one side to the other, so you need a motor controller or an H-bridge or something like that. That diode's probably to suppress any back EMF from that. Okay, so that makes sense. So we've got the SPI flash. That will be holding the firmware of the device. Let's flip over to the other side. So on this side, what have we got? So that's HiSilicon HI3516 SoC. So HiSilicon make the majority of DVR and low-cost IP camera chips, SoC system on chip. It's in a BGA package. It's got pretty much everything it needs in it, really. This little box here, so you can see how it stands quite proud of the surface. It's quite big. That's called the Ethernet magnetics. So it's a series of transformers and inductors used to isolate that Ethernet port. Then here we've got another small chip in QFN, quad flat no leads, I think that stands for. So that's a chip where the pins are accessible around the edge. Let me just take a look with the magnifying glass what that is. IP101GR made by IC+. So that's an Ethernet transceiver. Okay, so we've got the main SoC, we've got a Ethernet transceiver and the Ethernet magnetics. This is interesting because they've put an Ethernet port on the back of this, and it's perhaps not really necessary. It's not going to be used normally, but they've got an Ethernet transceiver and the Ethernet magnetics and the cable and the splitter and that connector, and it's not going to be used. That's quite extreme, really. Yeah. So you'll notice that this SoC doesn't have any external RAM, so the RAM's going to be contained within that package, I believe. These are quite low powered generally. They do run Linux, but it'll be quite low powered. I've just spotted something that I've missed actually. There's a pin header here, which you might just be able to see, that says GTR, ground, transmit, receive. There's no doubt in my mind that that is a serial port. Whether it's enabled or not, we don't know, but judging by most of this stuff, it will be enabled. It might not get us into a shell straight away. Can take a look at that later though. Can also just directly read the firmware off the SPI flash, but I'd rather root it. Rooting it's quicker, to be honest, gets me what I want. Right, so we've got the Wi-Fi module now. Let's come out a bit whilst we take this apart. It's on a little daughter board. Just before I take it off, actually, you'll notice in the base of this, there's a little bag of silica gel that says "Do not eat, don't eat it." That's a desiccant to stop any moisture harming the insides of this camera. I mean, to be fair, like it does have a gasket. It's made out of die-cast aluminium or something like that, or Zamac. But that connector at the back there for the Wi-Fi antenna probably isn't completely waterproof. I bet it does leak eventually. It just gives it a bit of extra life. Right, so let's pop these two posts off now. This kind of stack construction is really common. I think it means, you know, you can have ones with a Wi-Fi board, ones without a Wi-Fi board, different LED types, and just change it about a little bit. Let's pop the antenna off there and move that out of the way. Right, so we've got a little Wi-Fi module. Very, very small. Interesting, this board is single-sided. It's quite rare to find that. I mean, all it's doing really is taking this connector through to there. It's not doing much, it's just mounting this module. A couple of decoupling capacitors maybe. But you don't see single-sided boards very often. Let's zoom right in on that. So, that is a Realtek, what is it? A Realtek 8188 GTV. So the 8188 is used in quite a few USB Wi-Fi dongles. So I'd imagine that this is USB going through to the device. So that'll be a USB connection. Just a very small Wi-Fi system on chip. Now this module itself might be FCC certified, but I can't see an FCC ID on the whole thing. Right, so I think that's the whole camera. We've got the main board there, we've got the infrared board, and we've got the Wi-Fi board all together. There's a few clear parts into this, really. I'd imagine the Ethernet and the Wi-Fi might expose some network interfaces, some services that we could look at, but we've got that serial port as well. So what we can do is take a look at the serial port and see if we can get a console. If that fails, there's always that SPI flash chip to read the firmware off of, but I'm lazy. The serial port looks easier. So anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and all that YouTube stuff. And I'll probably be back with another video about what I find from the serial port in this thing. Thanks for watching. Bye.